So I saw that Athos, or at Octodoxy on Twitter, on X, recently came out with a banger of a tweet. It says, and I quote, "The obsession with lore, canon, power." Oh, I should be like this, shouldn't I be? I'm not a noob. I'm not one of those guys who only records vertically. The obsession with lore, canon, power scaling, etc., is the necrosis that belies the rot of disenchantment that has eaten away at our cultures. The need for spoon-fed and quantized exactitudes, specifications, and lists of abilities and timelines, it's all degenerate rot. What's the lore on this? What's the magic system? I need exact rules. Technically in canon, this character can lift, oh boy, this is 32,846 pounds, which makes him 2% weaker than you have ruined art and destroyed myth. Powerful. A powerful tweet. And you know, this has left me thinking about quite a few things. You know, am I dumb? Now, I think we can all agree that canon is retarded. See my video on see my essay, Franchise Fiction to Slop Pipeline. I turned that into a video, so you can go and check that video out. But in that video, I sort of talk about why canon is something you can ignore. Canon is it's not real. It's not a real thing. Companies do not. I shouldn't regurgitate everything I've already said in a previous video. Just go and see my Franchise Fiction to Slop Pipeline video. And yeah, canon, bad. Not a big fan of how canon is used. And it does kill the sort of enchantment that exists in art, especially modern day things like science fiction, I think. Oh, aren't I a hipster? Now, Athos brings a really great point here in his tweet where he talks about power scaling. And I have strong feelings on power scaling, and it has amazed me that I have not talked about power scaling on this channel before, because I have strong feelings about it. Power scaling, when you have a situation where like they try to quantify the amount of power a character has, that's the most stupidest thing. And through that system, well, the reason they make this system is because they want to try to immerse you into the world, and I'll talk about immersion a little bit later, but they want you to, you know, get a feel for how powerful the characters are, right? But then it gets really stupid once we start to enter fictional worlds with large cast of characters and a very wide range of power levels, you know, in a system especially where it's quantified by number. It's not really useful. And then you get these people who autistically go over the numbers and the data files, the text specs of the characters, and try to take that power level very seriously. And that is just insane to me and really misses the point of storytelling. It is like the farthest away you can get from a sort of literary analysis perspective. When you're trying to quantify what character would win in a fight, that's another thing. I'm not a big fan of, you know, death battles and who would win in a fight. Characters are tools for a story. And story is, you know, the ancients talked about how story, fiction, poetry was ultimately the purest form of philosophy. A philosophy not put into terms with philosophical language, but through everyday experience. It was philosophy through experience. Fiction, literature, tells us a little bit about the world we live in. It tells us about the sort of rules, about the logos, really, is what it ultimately does. Characters are ultimately a tool, a medium through which the story can tell the story, through which these themes, for example, can sort of come to be. Now, character-driven story has its place in time. I'm not trying to say that shouldn't be a thing, but I should say that we should understand the role characters are supposed to have in a story. They're kind of like vehicles, in a way, for theme, in a way. If we become hyper-fixated on the characters qua character, about them being independent entities from the context of a story, then it becomes really hard to talk about the characters in the context of everything. Everything is relational. Everything, the identity of everything, you like that little I did there? The identity of everything is found within relationships with other things. And between characters, that's called story. But sometimes people can take the power levels, the quantified power levels of a character, and try to create a sort of anti-story. You know, a story is about how there is, you know, there's a status quo, there's a conflict, a risk, threat to the status quo, and then there is the way the characters grow to learn to overcome that obstacle. You know, that's character growth. The thing with power levels is that it kind of creates a static position for the character if you take the power level too seriously. Now, I don't think any fiction that uses power levels takes the quantified power levels seriously. That's not how stories are told. You know, the whole point of stories is so people can go beyond what they typically can do. But when people take these power levels seriously and they say, who would win in a fight? Oh, this character would win because their power level is stronger. That's not how it works. The character wins based on what the point is in the story. It's interrelational. Conflicts between characters depends on a lot more than just the characters. I don't really like this position. I'm way too close to the camera. Where do we go next? But a really interesting thing, let me take this hat off. But a really interesting thing our friend points out in his tweet. I understand canon's not that interesting. I understand power leveling, power scaling. You know, those quantified power levels are cringe. But he brings up lore, which is interesting because this channel historically has kind of been a lore channel, specifically for Transformers lore. But his tweet is coming with good timing because I've been thinking a lot about the nature of lore, what purpose does lore serve, and what purpose does a lore video serve. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I decided I'll use his tweet as an opportunity to talk a little bit about those thoughts. In my video, which I put out recently, which was a sort of Christian analysis of post-anime depression, I talked a lot about J.R.R. Tolkien and his idea around the concept of escapism, where his concept of escapism came from, what purpose escapism serves, and how do we further escapism? How do we allow escapism to happen in a modern day story? We're going to talk about mythopoeia, eventually in a future video. But lore, you know, Tolkien's the lore guy. He's the world building guy. Lore exists to create an expansive world in which the reader, let's say for the sake of argument it's literature, that the reader can immerse themselves in, that they can take this secondary world seriously to help them to escape. And Tolkien talks about why escape's a good thing. See my video of the Christian analysis of post-anime depression. So it seems to me that lore, at least in its original formulation, was indeed a good thing. It's a good idea to create immersive worlds in the modern day with everything that the modern world... Oh my gosh, that is so loud. With everything that the modern world has taken from us, I don't know if you can hear that or not. Anyway, with everything the modern world has taken from us, we need stronger sorts of worlds to help us escape more, so that we can, you know, learn, immerse ourselves in a fictional world and allow ourselves to grow in the virtues through what we learn. and then bring that to the primary world, the real world, so to speak. That's the value of lore. Now, I do think modernity in its way, always tends to invert good things, take good things and then rip it apart and make it not good that, anymore. And I do agree that there is an abuse of lore. For one, a lot of lore these days is frankly marketing campaigns. Things like, we talked about this in my franchise fiction to slop pipeline, but things like, Star Wars lore. These days under Disney, we have all these different Star Wars shows and they all expand on the lore. But really, that's a marketing campaign. Really, that's Disney trying to get you to, consume more product is what they want you to do. It's not authentic, it's not genuine world building at that point in time. I live by a big racing area, so not like official racing, but like bikes will just race themselves out here. So if you hear a lot of that's what that is. Where was I before I was interrupted by the racers? I'm not a big fan of these racers. You might say that I'm a racist. Lore can also turn into a hurdle. Lore becomes a bad thing when lore itself becomes a distraction from the actual story. You do not get virtue through lore alone. You have to get it through stories, through the logos of the stories. You can't get that in just disconnected lore sound bites. This is related to history. To a certain extent, our real life lore is our history, our mythology. But if you analyze history in a way where it's a bunch of random events that don't have a telos, that don't have a natural endpoint, these are all just random, these are just beads on a string of events that one leads to the next, one leads to the next, that doesn't really help you. That's not really the point of studying history, to know event, and after this event happened, after that event, this event happened. The sort of cause and effect view of history, which I'm really turning against lately. You don't grow through that. There's no point to really studying that. What is good to study history is to study, human nature, to learn more about the world around us through history and how we can relate to the world. At that point, it's not lore, it's the human story. Did that sentence sound AI-ish? It's not lore, it's the human story. But it's the human story, and, that's more important than random isolated events. When we know the human story, we can participate in that story. Learning random historical events out of context, out of order, without any sense of telos, and for a Christian, telos would be the book of Revelation, the eschaton. Without that sort of sense, the study of history becomes pointless. And lore is very much the same deal. A lot of people just don't tell stories. They just sit there and build worlds forever and ever and ever. And that ultimately is a waste of time. You need to be telling stories. You need to be telling stories with the lore you are creating for your world. If you're just creating a world with no stories, nobody's going to get anything out of that. Now, maybe there's mini stories in your lore. That's another thing. But if you focus so much on economic systems of a certain village, that's nothing. That's a waste of time. Which then, okay, lore exists to help a story. The story is the main focus because it's from the story we can actually, use as art, appreciate as art. We can't do that with the lore by itself. We don't want, to, what's the word? There's a saying, miss the something for the something. I don't know. We want to make sure we keep our eye open on what's important, which is the story. Which makes me wonder, what is the point of a lore video, especially when Transformers lore has been such an important series on this channel? I have a feeling that a large chunk of you, maybe 50% these days, probably 50% of you, came to this channel because of my Transformers lore series, which was a series which I began as a disenchanted, unenchanted, materialist positivist. So very much these days I'm trying to get more into re-enchantment. Re-enchantment's really the name of the game. Looking at everything through the traditional enchanted lens. I kind of need to figure out, how does lore fit into that? How do I do Transformers lore from a re-enchanted perspective, or do I do it at all? Transformers lore season 2. There's been 2 seasons of Transformers lore so far. The first season was the OG series that lasted from December 2015 all the way until I did my big, change in, I think, 2017, when I said I don't do Transformers lore anymore. That's what I did in 2017. And so I declared no more Transformers lore, and I ended Transformers lore. But I think it was around 2019-ish or so, 2019, 2020, I decided, you know what, most people are here on this channel for Transformers lore. I should do Transformers lore again, partly as a ploy to get more money. I think I was doing this right before I needed to move to Japan, and I needed to save a lot of money for that. So I needed money, so I decided to do Transformers lore season 2. And Transformers lore season 2 has been what's been continuing on to this very day. But I'm here to announce, ladies and gentlemen, Transformers lore season 2 is over. We're moving on to season 3, ? And what do I mean by that? I mean, Commander Radix is entering a sort of renaissance, if you will. I have no idea how good or bad the audio is here. I'm currently under a table, but that's okay. But Commander Radix is going through a renaissance, a rebirth. I'm rediscovering my purpose as a person. I'm rediscovering my authenticity. That has been sort of the key word of the past, of 2025, really. Rediscovering who Commander Radix is. What do I enjoy doing? What do I want to do on this YouTube? And so, because we're entering a big shift, there's been a vibe shift on the Commander Radix channel, I think. But because we're in this shift, we have to figure out, what do we do with Transformers lore? And also, what do we do with history and lore? But that's another conversation. Today I want to talk about Transformers lore a little bit more. So what do I do with Transformers lore when I have discovered that I have come to a worldview where lore videos are kind of antithetical to how I see the world? Lore videos are doing exactly what I was complaining about what lore could become if lore went bad. Taking lore out of context of the story. Taking lore and looking at it individually, right? Which was very much a 2015, 16, 17 Commander Radix vibe. The Transformers world is so vast and expansive. You can even just take little chunks of it out of context and talk about them as different topics in a lore series. But now, I think that's the exact opposite of what lore should be. Lore should be to the service of a story. And so, I don't know, I still enjoy some, especially Elder Scrolls lore channels, but I also find that I actually enjoy more often analysis channels. I like it not when people are just retelling stories. Well, to some extent, retelling stories isn't lore, and there's a time and place for retelling stories, but I find that rather than listening to people talk about the statistics of a battleship, or talking about the history of a planet that exists in the world that's only showed up in 3 episodes or whatever, I find that I actually enjoy analysis more often. I enjoy theories more often. I enjoy people taking the story and breaking it down and showing what is good about the story, what is good about the thing they like. I think much more than lore, analysis fits me a little bit more. And when I think about the Transformers videos I've done that I like, it is never a Transformers lore video. I actually don't rewatch most Transformers lore videos. I sometimes rewatch like the infiltration, devastation, escalation videos. Uh, I'm more likely to rewatch a video that's telling a story than just talking about a lore concept. But more than that, I really enjoy my Transformers Talks series. And Transformers Talks, where I talk about Transformers, where I analyze Transformers a bit more, I found that those videos don't do that differently compared to Transformers lore videos. It seems that the audience who enjoys the Transformers lore videos also enjoy the Transformers Talks videos, and I think we can sort of combine the two. You know, I'm not really interested anymore in doing a video like, oh, let's take the planet Velocitron and let's talk about the specific continuity Velocitron and its entire history. Talking about like the main series as if they were side events in the history of the planet. That doesn't appeal to me. I don't like making those videos. I don't like watching those videos. There's nothing I like about those videos. But if I could talk about, I have a video coming up. I haven't released it yet. I haven't finished editing it yet. I don't know which will come first, that video or this video you're watching right now. But I'm working on a video right now about Homeric Cybertron. It's an analysis of Transformers through the lens of seeing how it connects to the Homeric literature, the Odyssey, the Iliad, right? It's sort of my main point is showing how even modern fiction is connected to the tradition, which is one of my main goals. My main goal in life is to show how, how tradition plays a role in everyday life. And Transformers being connected to the Western literary tradition and therefore ultimately to the Iliad, that's something I'm interested in talking about, and that's a video I'm interested in watching. So yeah. So I'm thinking Transformers Lore Season 3, it might not be called Transformers Lore. I'm also trying to get away from series titles, especially in the title of the video. But spiritually speaking, Transformers Lore Season 3 is going to turn into these more analysis-based videos. I might still do stories. There are some stories that I do want to retell, sort of comic story in style. But a lot of the more, power level-y stuff of Transformers lore, I find that I'm not really that interested in doing anymore. But I think that's okay. It's not like back in 2017 when I said I'm not going to do Transformers lore anymore. That's not the case. The case is Transformers lore as a series is going to be continuing under a different title, continuing in a more spiritual sense, in a way that fits the aims and the vision and the philosophy of the Commander Radix channel as a result of this renaissance. How do I get out of here? So I think if you enjoy Transformers lore, you're going to enjoy the stuff that's going to be coming out. You're going to I think you're going to love the Homeric Cybertron video. I think you're going to love the symbolism of Transformers is going to continue. And I think you'll enjoy the more analytic videos I do about Transformers. And, in that sense, Transformers lore is continuing. The name of the game, my focus for Commander Radix going forward. In fact, I wrote a new sort of description for my YouTube channel that I think really describes what I am aiming for as we move to the future for this channel. I'll read that out to you right now. I say, I'm Commander Radix, formerly Primus Prime 22. Here you'll find a wide array of content from history videos and philosophy breakdowns to pop culture, especially Transformers, analysis, anime talks, vlogs, or even games. My purpose? To explore meaning, beauty, and truth in a world that often forgets those things exist. Topics may vary, but the through line is consistent: engagement with modernity through a traditional, re-enchanted lens. My mission is to pass down knowledge about the living tradition so that more people in this fractured world may flourish through a life rooted in that tradition. This channel is a personal outlet for self-expression as well as an analytical project. If you're looking for videos from a modern man with an old soul riding the Kali Yuga that are reflective, occasionally eccentric, and grounded in something deeper, this is the channel for you. My background as a Christian, Southerner, and of Okinawan heritage shapes the way I see the world, but all are welcome here. That's sort of the mission statement. That's sort of the vibes Commander Radix is having going forward. You know, I have to ask myself, for what reason am I doing this YouTube thing? For one, it's self-expression, yes, that makes it very self-indulgent for me, but what purpose am I putting it out there? In what way is it relational? Well, you know, I am, how would you say it? I aspire to participate in the tradition. And you can see my video, What is Tradition, to see what I mean by that. But, you know, I can take what I learn and give that to people through my videos. So that's another aspect to it. Really the name of the game is re-enchantment. Okay, and lore videos that are done in a certain way that disconnect it from the story, that's soulless. I think Athos said so as much. Halo Sniper Rifle said, "What's the story on this is better than what's the lore on this?" And Athos says, "It's all so soulless." I don't want to be soulless. I don't want to make you guys soulless. And, you know, these things were things I've been thinking about for a long while now. It's just destiny. It's providence that these tweets came out as I was thinking about this stuff. And, you know, it really helped me focus a little bit more on what I want to do with this channel. What do I want to do with this content? But I think ultimately this is going to make everything change for the better. This isn't like 2017 Radix, who just stopped all Transformer stuff entirely. No, we are going through a rebirth. We are going through a regeneration. We are Regeneration 1. Anyway, that's all for this vlog. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. This would be a very weird video to be introduced to the channel, seeing as I was underneath a table for a third of it. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Follow me on social media. All links are in the description. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.